we all got on our own. We all either went away to college and we began choosing different friends and different things. And you hear, we all chose to rebel. And you're kind of like thinking, wait a minute, my family wasn't that bad. My life wasn't that bad. What happened here? But it is interesting because we weren't taught the relationship. We weren't taught the relationship of the rules that we had and why we believed those things. So I just think it really came to me, that whole thing was, the fact that, because I've questioned it, why did I rebel? What was it that made me decide that I really want to go out and live a life, And then you find yourself, like some of you have talked about, and like, I experienced. So I think it's interesting because also we find, don't children love really discipline? I mean, we all act like we don't want to say no to our kids. Don't say no to the kids. But in the long run, they have loved being disciplined. They know that they were loved. They know that they were cared for. They knew as an adult or whatever, that it was for their own good. So I think this weekend.
And it reminds me, you can't have love without the discipline. If you have the discipline without the love, it doesn't work. If you have the love without the discipline, that doesn't work. You have to have two together in order for it to fully work.
Yeah, they can't be arbitrary or capricious.
Yeah.
Exactly. This kind of very much closely goes up, but we'll ask the third question here. What happens when people get too focused on keeping laws and miss the purpose of laws? I think it's
stop praying.
Stop crying.
Stop praying.
Yeah. I think it does tie in very much about relationships. We lose the relational aspect, whether it's our relationship with God and our prayer time with God, whether it's with each other. We're so concerned with the minutiae of the law, which is very much what happened to the Pharisees and those people in that time. And I think the Pharisees, to their credit, tried. I mean, but they just took it to such an extreme that it separated them from everybody else, and it separated. It kind of in a sense destroyed their relationship with the rest of the population that couldn't even come close to maintaining that level of law abidance.
I can think of an example. I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, and the law was you don't do anything on Sunday. Of course, there was certain farm work that had to be done, but that was it. You didn't spend time visiting with anybody because you were supposed to be, I guess, lying around doing nothing. Other than when after you got finished with church, then you had to be quiet the rest of the day. And there were no relationships established with that. It didn't really make any sense.
So I have if we have time, I'll just give this little experience that my family had. We have a very dear friend who rebelled at 16 from the Amish community. So he lived in Illinois, and his father was the patriarch in that community. And he, at 16, hit the highway and went to the big city of St. Louis. And so years later, he chose to never go back to the Amish community, but that community was willing to accept him back in as an outsider because he still had family. So my family went and spent the day with this community, and our friend Alan and all of his brothers and his family. And so what we saw that day we spent with them from sun up to sundown was the people working hard to keep the letters of the law and working equally hard to find every loophole within the letter of the law. They were the most legalistic group, as a group of people I'd ever encountered. Yet they really were filled with love. They loved each other and supported each other. It was a beautiful thing to see that aspect of love, and they genuinely loved God. But my goodness, were they hung up on the legalism of their faith. So, no electricity, right, Amish. However, like for example, one brother had a factory on his property, like in a pole barn, and he made wooden beds, and then they sold it down in one of those little Amish shops by the highway. Well, because they needed to mill that, it was okay for him to have electricity for that. And of course, they don't have phones in the Amish community, but he could, because he needed it to reach the outside world for business. But it had to be outside the building with a little lean-to, and you could only use it for supposedly for business practices, right? And they'll have generators and they'd have kerosene lanterns. So, they were what I call living in the loopholes.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting to see how that legalism had just become an art form of its own and perhaps missing the whole point of the law. But they did love God. Very genuine with that.
Thanks. Okay, well, on page 73, we get the tension in the story. Why is God so concerned with rules? And I think we touch here, rules reveal what's important, what's not. They point us away from danger and show us the route to safety. Second, they tell us a lot about the rule maker. Kind of, if you want to know what's valuable to God, just examine the rules He's established and what they're designed to protect. Like Ted talked about, its relationships. Finally, the rules are there to help us test what we're made of, test what our character, and to show us that it's kind of a mirror. We can't, by breaking, by the rules that we're breaking, kind of shows us where our character flaws are. It also shows us that we need a savior. One line here that really got me is, and when you consider that God never introduced His law apart from the context of an intimate relationship, it's clear God is more concerned with protecting us than limiting us. Rules not only reflect God's character, they reveal ours. So is it fair for God to give us rules? Why or why not?
Can I interject a question here
Sure.
while we're on this
Yeah.
topic? So on page 73, it opens with that question, why is God so concerned with rules? And our writing really answers that question, and we talk about that. But I'd like to hear from you all from your perspective, if you have an answer to that, and what do you think the general response would be? If you asked the gals at your table in a few weeks, what kind of answer do you think the general public, the average Christian, the average Joe Schmo, how would they actually answer this question?
Ask the question again for the.
Why is God so concerned with rules?
Christian ladies, and say because He loves you.
A little louder.
Yeah, but we're talking about the
Louder.
starting point, ladies.
But
The
both,
outside
we'll
looking
ask
in.
them both. I like the answer, and I
Okay.
want that answer too, but say it nice and loud.
Christian ladies would say God did it because He loved them. That's
Because
why
He loved
made
them.
His rules, because He loved us. He wanted to protect us. And I think that's the response you get from believers.
So you're saying, Julie, that the believers would recognize that the rules are a manifestation of love and protection.
Believers.
Believers would say that.
I don't know what the comments would be from the seekers.
Hmm?
That as a believer myself, that's what I truly believe.
I would think that the women at our table, though, won't have that, because it has taken a long time for me to finally accept that the rules that God has put there are for me and in my best interest. And so I would assume that unless they've done a lot of growing with God, that they're not going to have that feeling. They're going to probably see Him, as my mother sees Him, the God of the Old Testament is the mean God, and the God of the New Testament is the nice God. And, they might still have that feeling.
I think myself as younger, I would have said to control me, so I don't irritate him.
Really? That's
Well,
what I would have
you know,
thought. Yeah, I would have. It's along the lines of a parent,
Right.
to behave, to be good, to do the right thing.
So you can get
But I
into
was
heaven.
thinking about what someone
So
said.
you can get into heaven.
About their two-year-old. You tell the 2-year-old don't go out in the street, and it's not just to control and try to ruin their day, it's to protect them. And I think that's a good analogy.
Mhm.
Why are you doing this? And I can think of things that my parents did that really protected me, like with boys, for example, and you get a lot of rules, and I'm grateful.
But isn't it also the point, not just if you're a Christian, that God created the rules because He loves you, but really to see if you're going to obey? Because if it's all about me, then what is the point of following God if I'm just going to lose my own inhibition? I
I think a lot of people who don't go to church think that it's a baseline for God's judgment, and that's all it is. You know, I mean, that's when I learned that at 12, I gave up all hope.
Yeah.
It's because I could never meet that baseline for His judgment. You
And
know,
unfortunately, a lot of Christian traditions or Christian type church traditions
yeah.
perpetuate that.
And
And
really, out of those of us in the room, did you all have that belief at some point?
I did.
The rules were the
Yes,
baseline, is
absolutely,
God's
yes.
judgment, or is the way into heaven?
Yes.
Like you
Or
said.
the rules were there so that you
Yes.
couldn't have any fun.
There you go.
To control you.
That's pretty much your baseline for judgment. No fun, lots of rules. Now I judge.
If something bad happened to me, it was because I must have broken a rule.
Yeah,
It was God's judgment on me, and I deserved it.
Wow.
Karma.
God was, I think it's a standard for perfection, and I think that it's God is perfect, He doesn't need rules, He's putting the rules because this is where you fall short. So when we look at the laws, we think, oh my gosh, I can never do all of that, you know, and so when we look at just the law, that's when I say I fall short, and I think God wants us there. I think He wants us to look at the standard of perfection and realize that we aren't, because what comes beside of that is grace. I need God's grace. I can't fulfill the law.
And I think at the starting point, it's a huge wowza to a lot of people when Andy says it is a confirmation of His love, not a condition. I mean, that's the first time so many people are going to hear that. And coming from an authority like Andy, that's pretty big to a lot of people. Like, oh, now I get it. So this is a kind of a big eye-popping moment and starting point for a lot of people.
I think that's a buzz phrase for us as leaders
It
to
is.
remember, to make sure
It is.
that they get that point. And remember, you're going to have ladies who listen. It's so much work. Maybe they didn't do it this week. So
Exactly.
make sure you catch that phrase, because I think the whole thing hinges on that.
And give some real examples. I mean, you know, it's always great to lock that in with some just really good examples of your own. Give them a little metaphor for a confirmation of love rather than condition of. If you keep my rules, I'll love you. No. Because I love you, I'm giving you rules so you can live within these parameters and stay safe. So I think if you can, as much illustration as you can offer people at that point is great.
I forget where it was in, if I read it in here or if it was on the tape or whatever, but it was talking about, basically this is like one of Satan's greatest weapons, is that it's one of his great lies to
Yes.
to us and to God, is that this get them mixed up on that, the laws versus, because so many people believe that you have to be good in order to get to heaven.
Yes.
And it's just not about that.
And it's beautiful that Andy says that on the CD. Why do so many of us think that the only way to God or heaven or a relationship with Jesus is through behavior? Why do we think that? Well, because that's what the public perception is, you know? Yeah.
Right.
And that's the way it is with most religions.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, a lot of religions are performance-based,
Yeah.
so,
Well, and it's also the
Muslim,
concept.
Buddhist, whatever, that's the way it is. And I think a lot of people apply that to their Christian faith.
Yeah.
I think the old saying that the Puritans coming out from the East Coast into the Midwest, but they had the overwhelming fear that somewhere someone was having a good time. And Doug grew up in Minnesota, I grew up in Iowa, and I told him that, and he could definitely relate to that from the environment in
The
Minnesota.
overwhelming fear that someone might be having a good time.
And
But-
that they needed to go straighten them out?
Oh, okay. Well, no, they didn't
Or they wanted to have the good
They were more
time.
concerned about what the neighbors might, or somebody else might think. What if they thought I was having a good time? It wasn't what God thought. It starts to just become performance-based for people you know, your neighbors, friends, whatever. What do they say?
It really sets a judgment
Right.
amongst the people
This-
in that community.
This is also a really great aha moment for people from other cultures and religions. I think it was Doug that said a couple of years ago that so many religions don't know when they've behaved themselves into heaven or karma or whatever it is. When do I get there? How many vows do I have to do today to behave myself into the kingdom of
Where's the
what is my
line?
kingdom again?
Right.
Where's the
line?
line? There's no clear line anywhere.
So for, again, a lot of people at your tables, this is going to be such a big wowza.
Yeah.
Great point.
Thank you, Maggie.
Great. So, which rules do we associate with God that are hard for us to keep.